Hey, everybody, welcome in to the 15-minute drill with Jimmie Allen here on YouTube. No after hours tonight, so I had some time to record a podcast. We got to get to the breaking news of the day. Nebraska commit Trae Taylor has chosen to transfer high schools. Now, he's not going somewhere in the state of Illinois. Obviously, the Carmel Catholic, Lake Hills, Illinois native is actually coming not to Lincoln, but to Omaha. And he's transferring into powerhouse Millard South. Obviously, Millard South last year winning a state championship, one of the most dominant teams in the history of the state. Jet Tamala, the Alabama quarterback, was at Millard South last year. But it sounds like Trae Taylor's not coming alone. And there's a lot of discussion about what this means for the future of not only Trae Taylor, but the future of high school athletics. And for anybody that doesn't watch my radio show After Hours, we have a ton of we have high school teams come in and out, both male and female. We talk to the majority of the high school teams throughout the state, and there's a lot of, I don't want to call it animosity, but maybe questions from parents and people around the metro here in Omaha that are saying, what does this mean for our kids? And is this going to be a trend? Can we expect out of state, high ranking players to start doing this more often? And this isn't something that's new to anybody that's a Nebraska football fan. Anybody that has been following the quarterback in Lincoln for the last 2 years knows this is kind of what he did throughout his entire high school career. Dylan Raiola went to 4 different high schools in 3 different states, going from Texas to Arizona to Georgia, kind of following where he was committed with his last school. He was committed to play for the Georgia Bulldogs when he transferred to Buford. Trae Taylor is doing this, according to Trae and the comments he made on Twitter today, to be closer to the football program in Lincoln. And also, be available if there's a visit. Listen, if he's in state, he can go down to Lincoln every Saturday, those 8 Saturdays throughout the year, to help peer recruit. And that seems to be the point of all this. Also, you get a chance to come play for a powerhouse in Millard South. They absolutely dominated Class A here in Nebraska last year, but it beckons the question, kind of like, where's the line? And listen, this is the trickle down effect. Everything we're seeing happen across the board in college athletics is trickling down to the high school ranks. I mean, whether you look back to a guy like Williams Winery, who was highly considering Nebraska coming out of high school, they passed a law in the state of Missouri that allows high school students to get NIL money if they stay with their in-state school. He ends up going to Missouri for his freshman year, clearly not working out, ends up coming to Lincoln and making a pretty big impact for Matt Rule in Nebraska a year ago. But you have to wonder if this is something bigger that is coming to effect, maybe like the law in Missouri that we just talked about. It feels like it's probably a little bit bigger than just Trae Taylor wanting to come here to peer recruits in Nebraska. Now, I want to preface this saying that anybody that doesn't follow Trae Taylor on social media, he's a pretty big peer recruiter and is a big catalyst for the success, top 5 current recruiting class in the nation that Nebraska has in the 27 class. And listen, you got a quarterback that scored 5 touchdowns in multiple games last season for Lake Carmel in Illinois a year ago, and if he can do even close to replicate that in Millard South's offense, I think the people in Nebraska that haven't had a chance to see Trae Taylor play are in for a very big surprise. But I think the question, if you're a parent at Millard South at this point, is, what does this mean for my kid? Why are we allowing this to happen? And I just talked about it a minute ago. This is the trickle down effect. This is the transfer portal in college trickling down to high school. Now, anybody in the Omaha area knows this is something that's been, I don't want to call it an issue, but something that has been consistent really since they allowed open enrollment throughout the districts. Is you've had players transferring to schools where winning is more prevalent, and obviously there's something to it, probably, that there's some players that are transferred to schools in better neighborhoods or for a quote better education, or not in public schools. And I think there's I don't think there's as much to that. I think it's more about the winning and trying to get your son or daughter to the next level in schools that see more recruiting, or if you're winning more, you're going to get more attention, et cetera. I mean, you had 9 players from Millard South a year ago that ended up going to Division I schools on the football program alone, and as I mentioned, winning a state championship. So it makes sense that a Trae Taylor would want to transfer into a program like that. But I think this is almost unprecedented waters. This is a kid that goes to school in Illinois choosing to transfer into the Omaha area. That's not something that we've seen locally. Obviously, I just talked about the Dylan Royal effect, but something locally that I can remember for, almost 20 years, that a kid that transfers in from out of state ends up going to Nebraska is here to essentially be at the beck and call of the coaching staff to come in and help peer recruit. But I also think it opens up an interesting pipeline, because we mentioned all the recruits from Millard South last year. Not a lot of, I think only 2 of those kids no, one of those guys ends up going to Lincoln. And Jet Tamala was a high profile prospect coming out of Millard South. He ends up going to Alabama, and he's good enough to play at Alabama. He's a multi sport athlete, a great basketball player as well, and clearly a very very good quarterback. But Trae Taylor, I would be really surprised if Trae Taylor is coming alone. There's been a lot of speculation. There's been some tweets out from a bunch of different 27 prospects, specifically Tay Ellis, on message boards, retweeting or sharing out the post of Trae Taylor choosing to transfer to Millard South, which just the caption just saying interesting. This kind of feels like a movement by this 27 class to get closer to Lincoln, and it feels like they're coming in with the intentions of being a once in a generation class in Lincoln. They very much already are that. A ton of one 5-star guy, a bunch of different 4-star guys. Trae Taylor, a guy that might end up having that 5th star added to his ranking by the time he's done at Millard South, and playing in that offense is going to do him some favors. I caution anybody that's thinking about doing this in the future. If your son or daughter is a freshman or a sophomore, and you're like, well, what if I live in Omaha, or what if I live in Lincoln, and my kid is interested or commits to a place like Tennessee? Should we move down there? I don't know what it is, but it feels like something is coming to put the toothpaste back in the tube, essentially the transfer portal. And when we start talking about NIL money for high school players, man, getting agents involved with high school and teenage kids, it's already sleazy enough at the college level, but when we're talking about hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars for high school prospects, which seems to be the way we're trending. I'm not insinuating anybody is doing that or offering that up until this point, but we talked about the Williamsville area and states like Georgia, Missouri, Texas, or excuse me, Georgia, Missouri, Tennessee, and Arkansas, all having laws put in place for high school kids to be able to garner money from NIL as high school athletes. We've seen several players, we've seen several grown men go off to the NFL and get millions of dollars or life changing money for the first time. And I'm not here. Anybody that knows me, listens to my radio show, follows me on Twitter, knows I've always been pro pay the players. I think if you have the ability to make money off your name, image, likeness, you should absolutely do that. But we're talking about crossing a line here eventually, and currently in some states, of paying high school kids without representation, or maybe a mom and dad that doesn't know how to have those conversations or make sure that their son or daughter is getting the most value for their money. And the only way to counter that is with agents. Now, and that opens up the door for high school prospects to be taken advantage of, or maybe giving up too much of their leverage and their financial gain. I listen. I'm not against Trae Taylor coming to Omaha to play at Millard South or come to Lincoln or be around the program. I think anybody, if you have the ability to transfer somewhere and better your life, or it makes your situation better, I think everybody should have that opportunity. I think open enrollment is fine. I also think, and I think it's talked about a negative connotation a lot. There's been a lot of OPS, which is Omaha Public Schools, or the local public school system teams that have come into our radio show that have almost had this like insurgence of energy, or a will show you type mentality that we have to work harder to keep our kids in our system because this is their home neighborhood and their hometown. And I think a lot of these things could be true. I mean, there could be something to Trae Taylor coming to Millard South for a lot of different reasons. But I do think he just seems very all in on Matt Rule and the Huskers program and making sure that 27 class stays intact. And I don't know if I feel differently about that because I'm a Nebraska fan, or I've gotten to personally know Trae Taylor, and I wouldn't maybe feel I personally through his social media. I've never talked to him, but personally through his social media and the interviews he's done, and see what type of kid he projects himself as, to say that this feels different. It doesn't feel cheap. It doesn't feel sleazy. It feels like he's doing this for all the right reasons. Would I feel this way if he was a quarterback committing to Florida? I don't know. I can't say that for sure, but this feels like it's being done for all of the right reasons. Now, will I feel that way if 4 or 5, 6, 7 of the commits come with him? Probably not, to be honest with you, because that just kind of shows you that this was a concentrated effort to maybe house kids under an umbrella that will eventually give them a year, almost as a red shirt, even to get to Lincoln. And I don't love that aspect of it. But I like I said, I will be really surprised if Trae Taylor ends up at Millard South alone. But if you're a Millard South parent and you're frustrated by this, I think you have every right to be. I mean, but with that being said, you also have the benefit of open enrollment now. If Millard South is your neighborhood school, and you were always planning on your kids being a Patriot because they were in your backyard, and now they're aspiring to play college football, or maybe start at the high school level and be a contributor on their football team at a position where an athlete from outside of the state who is more talented or higher ranked or sought after more than your student. I think you have every right to be frustrated with that, and I think we need to hear those voices as well. But with Trae Taylor coming into Millard South, I really feel like this is a level of maturity that I think Husker fans should be really happy about, and almost. There's been a lot. This is like the first offseason where there's not a ton of great vibes around the Husker program for a long time, and I think we talked about it last week on this podcast with Mike Eckler leaving, and obviously Dylan Raiola choosing to leave. It feels like there seems to be this exodus out of the program right now. And people have called my radio show or tweeted at us and said, "Oh, we're losing faith in Matt Rule," or he seems like a used car salesman. There's been a lot of negative connotations around the head coach. But this is a high-profile – we're just talking about Trae Taylor right now. We're not talking about the other guys that may be coming. This is a high-profile quarterback, the second one of the Matt Rule era, by the way. You throw TJ Lateef in there, so three high-profile quarterbacks who have come to Lincoln, have decided to stay. Obviously, Dylan chooses to leave. But go back and watch my Dylan Raiola to Oregon video. I think that has a lot to do more to do with Dylan's injury than it does Matt Rule or Nebraska. But TJ Lateef had the opportunity to leave. Listen, they went out and got two other quarterbacks. Daniel Kalen comes back to Lincoln. You added Anthony Calandria to the conversation. Trae Taylor is sitting in the wings, ready to come in and essentially be anointed day one. Now, I don't think that's going to be the case. He's clearly going to have to earn it. But TJ Lateef had the opportunity to leave, too. There were more quarterbacks in the transfer portal this year than there were schools for those kids to transfer to. But TJ Lateef chose to stay at Nebraska. He chose to believe in Matt Rule. He chose to believe in Dana Holgorsen and seemed to want to continue to try to earn that number one spot. Like, it's not a foregone conclusion that Anthony Calandria is going to be the starter in the fall. Now, I think the fact that we're going to get a traditional spring game this season, it's going to help iron out some things. And there's a lot of people that put a lot more into what happens in a spring game than I do. And I think that stuff will all be ironed out before we get to that day. But the fact that not only does TJ Lateef decide to stay in Lincoln, the fact that Daniel Kalen chose to come back too after leaving the program. Yeah, it's obviously his hometown, or not his hometown, but his home state school. I think that's got to be a nod to Matt Rule, and I think Matt Rule deserves that recognition for getting a guy that chose to leave the program to be able to come back. And obviously, Anthony Calandria wasn't their number one pick out of the transfer portal. That was Kenny Minchie, and he chose to go to Kentucky. But that seemed to be more about money than it seemed to be about Matt Rule or the Nebraska program. But the moral of the story is, or the headline, I guess, is that you have a kid that is choosing to come to Lincoln / Omaha, transfer his high school out of his senior year, and go all in to be around this program to help it succeed and help it move forward. And I don't think that could be understated. Like, take all the success and all the transfers that Millard South had a year ago, and I know there's a lot of people that are upset about that and feel like that needs to be fixed or changed. But, you know, the caveat to that is, if you have a student in your life that is a drama, or wants to be a drama major, or wants to act in plays, or wants to go to a school that it has a better computer science program, they have the ability to do that. And so oftentimes we make it about athletics. And listen, that's where the big money is. It's driving a lot of schools. That I think the positivity and the goodness of open enrollment is still a net positive, to the point where I think the positives outweigh the negatives. But listen, I think you're going to see some kids that are currently at Millard South probably playing at other schools next year too. And I think it's great that they have the opportunity to do this. If you haven't had a chance to like and subscribe to the 15-minute drill, please do so on YouTube. It helps out the channel a ton. I've been Jimmie Allen. Thanks for watching. Go Big Red. We'll see you next time.